we bet our whole year on those first few weeks in January and gauge our success or failure by that, when in reality, they're just another month. It's just another day of the year.
One of the habits is when you are doing something that pushes you out of your comfort zone, be also okay to step back into your comfort zone.
Stop giving people the pen to write your story when you can choose to write every day how you want it.
You know, we talked about a whole bunch of different approaches you could take this year, whether it's going, doing the January and trying that out. Just give your permission to be flexible this year and see where you land.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Living Richly podcast. We're so excited you've joined us again. We're so thankful for your continued support of the show, and we're excited that you're joining us for today's conversation, which is part 2 of a conversation we started, I guess last time.
In part 1.
In part one,
we started the conversation.
That was this is part 2. So this is a continuation, I guess is what we're trying to say, of that conversation around starting your year off strong. We had such great conversation around this whole notion of I guess the myths that people have around what the new year stands for and New Year's resolutions. And I'm curious for you guys, from that conversation, what was the one thing that really resonated with you?
One thing?
The one thing, Benny.
I don't know. The episode hasn't dropped yet. I have to watch it. There was so much good that came out of that, but the notion that you brought up on adaptive goal setting,
right,
and then the brilliant analogy that I used with the adaptive cruise control that was made that even better. But
right,
no, there was. I just love the notion of being able to even with our goals, whether we know it in business, we do it in business, but in our personal lives, to allow ourselves the ability to adapt and shift where that goal is going, depending on the progress that you're making.
Yeah, love that. That's great.
Yeah, that was such a good one. I think for me, it was the concept of using like January as your test month.
Right.
Like use it as a figure out, pick your goal and then try a bunch of things to help you achieve your goal and find the one that sticks.
Yeah.
So it takes the pressure off of January and it kind of allows you just to find that one that gets you all excited and you get passionate about.
Yeah, like your warm-up month, warming yourself up into. Yeah, I love that.
I love that.
Yeah, I think for me it was tying your non-negotiables into your values and making sure that those two are very clearly aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it comes down to values so often. Well, for me, is I think we brilliantly solved the whole issue of New Year's resolutions and why they don't work. And we actually gave people a winning formula. Like, if you want to be that person who says, I am rocking my New Year's goals, just choose to sleep more, gain 20 pounds, drink more, and you'll be a rock star.
I am on track. January 14th, I'm on track.
You're on track. You're still on track, right? I shared it with Steve, our producer, and he said, those are noble goals. Right. So, no, for me, it was the whole notion of we put so much. It's like we bet our whole year on those first few weeks in January and gauge our success or failure by that, when in reality, they're just another month. It's just another day of the year. That growth and transformation can happen anytime you choose it. Every day is a new day, and you can pick a new direction based on what's relevant to you and what matters most. So I think it was a great conversation. And today we want to talk and dive into how to build momentum, right? So if it's not about trying to rock January so much as to build momentum throughout the year, what are some small, realistic practices that have worked for you when it comes to building momentum in your life?
Yeah, two things. Write it down. I'm just such a believer in writing it down because I think it holds you accountable. And another way to kind of help keep you accountable is get an accountability partner. I so believe in that. I think often you see it in the gym, right? Like you have a gym buddy, someone you go to the gym with, or you have, you sign up for some coaching, right? So you have something holding you accountable. I think that can help for a lot of people.
Yeah. Love that. Yeah. We're going to be talking about accountability actually in our next show, I think, right? So that'll be great.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's being exceptionally intentional about what you consume and how, like, what you are filling your environment in, because I believe so strongly in your mind listens to everything you tell it. And even in the morning, how you start your day is how you run your day, right? So if we're already, looking at Facebook and everybody else's stuff and what's going on, I'm such a believer in be so intentional about what is in your environment and what you're consuming, what you're reading, what you are watching, what you are like. I don't listen to the news much because I get so caught up in it. I just find that it sets the tone for just my energy is just depleted.
Yeah.
So pay really close attention to that.
Yeah. If you're going to try to build momentum, don't be engaging in stuff that actually
100%.
saps your motivation, right? And your energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would add and we talked about that, this in the opening of last show, the notion of those tiny habits, right? You can let the progression grow. And lots of examples of that, right? Don't feel like you need to read a book a week, which is often a goal that people set. Maybe it's just start with 10 pages.
How about just start reading?
What about just open the cover, right? But whatever that is, and it's those little habits continue to build and they become the big thing over time.
Yeah.
I would say I would add to that, like pick one non-negotiable thing that you're going to do for a period of time. So simple. Right. So maybe if it's, and again, I loved how in the last show, we broke it down into, it could be setting a weekly theme. It could be setting a theme for a quarter, but instead of trying to set this impossible new menu of things that you need to engage in order to feel like you're successful, is that there might be times where you're just leaning into one of those things. Yeah. But as long as you're doing it, hold yourself to account. And I would say the other piece is pick something that pushes you outside of your comfort zone. We all need places to retreat. We all need places to recharge, but too much of that and not enough of something that makes you feel uncomfortable. And we can comfort can become our enemy. Right. So we go from just recharging and renewing to we're just kind of coasting. Right.
It's interesting you say that, because I think even to tie that in is, one of the habits is when you are doing something that pushes you out of your comfort zone, be also okay to step back into your comfort zone from time to time, right? Like, so if you're pushing yourself here, maybe that means Friday night you are just going to relax and you're going to get into that place where you're comfortable to recharge. It's, the idea of just building up that strength again to keep moving into those things that you're trying to do.
It goes back to the flexibility and adaptability we were talking about right in the first conversation, to say that the problem with often is we're too rigid. And we hold ourselves to these standards that just don't allow for real life, and allow for seasons and things that change. So being committed to something and yet being willing to flex given what's going on. It's not about giving up too easily, but it's also about that self-acceptance and that grace,
that flexibility
to get back in the saddle if you fall off, right?
Yeah, big time.
A lot of talk when it comes to building momentum. There's so much out there about morning routines. And again, some that are very prescriptive about exactly what that morning routine should look like, to just, I think, common elements that can show up in morning routines that are helpful in how you start your day, you run your day, right? What's that look like for you? What has been your experience around morning routines, and what advice would you have to our listeners about some things they might experiment with to help them launch each day with greater energy?
Mm-hmm. For me, morning meditation has changed a lot. If I don't meditate first thing in the morning, I don't meditate. My brain is like firing on all cylinders if I get to the end of the day. And if I get to the end of the day, I'm falling asleep when I meditate. So that's not working either. So for me, I literally...
We call that a nap.
Yeah, that's meditation.
I have a 30-minute meditation.
Right? Napitation.
Napitation. There it is.
Napitation. Meditation for me in the morning is huge. And sometimes it's 5 minutes. Sometimes it's 20 minutes. Sometimes it's 7 minutes. No, I'm going to keep going.
For the next 20 minutes, we're going to get all the variations of how that might.
It could be 8 minutes.
It could be 8.5.
God, I went down a trail there. But meditating for me allows my brain to, like, when I meditate, I'm very visual. And so what it allows me to do is I immediately start thinking of the million things I have to do. And I literally swipe in my meditation and I swipe all the stuff out. And then I start thinking about those bigger picture pieces. So when you talk about New Year's resolutions, I think about, I want to grow my business or whatever that is. And I put it out there and I think about it, and then I let go to the universe and I meditate. And so for me, that it just creates that focus for me first thing in the morning. I don't always do it well. There's times the to-do list just flies right back in, right? But the practice of it every day is now a habit for me. And it's something I do pretty, I would say consistently, at least 5 days a week.
Yeah, it's
now.
amazing.
Well, and I love that you give yourself flexibility around that. It doesn't have to be, if I don't do 20 minutes, then I'm not doing a good job at meditating.
Right.
Like I think that's.
It was a badatation.
Right. But I think so many people think it has to be a certain way. If I'm meditating, it has to be done this way and this way. And just letting things flow with and meeting yourself where you're at. I know for me, I like to use a tool called the Daily 3. Mm-hmm. So 3 things, and you could call it a power list. You could call anything where it's 3 small, like very small, simple things to help you have the satisfaction of feeling. There's nothing more frustrating than at the end of the day, people feel like the day was so busy, but I don't know what I did all day.
Yeah.
And so just whether it's, scheduling the kid's dentist appointment, or, okay, I got a call to get the winter tires put on, or I've got whatever it is, just very small things, and the satisfaction of doing that daily 3 and checking them off gives you that feeling of moving forward.
Yeah. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Immediately for me, it was don't hit the snooze button, right? Don't fall into the snooze trap. And so many people do that. And then what happens is you're rushed. And when you're rushed, all of a sudden you stop. I can't, I don't have time for that anymore. And we see it all the time. And even how, whether it's business goals or whatever your intentions are, personal, whatever, you all of a sudden just get too busy when you don't plan that time. And a lot of that just happens because of the snooze. I will add this though, and I would encourage, because we recognize, we say this all the time on the show. I think we all agree that a morning routine helps and is a really powerful thing that people can do. I also recognize, though, for some people, it's not a morning routine, it's an evening routine, or it's a midday routine. Yeah. And because some people, they'd be like, oh, if I try to meditate when I first get up in the morning, and then I'm falling asleep again. Right?
100%.
So there's the freedom that even though we're talking, and this does work for us, we're all people that I think that morning really works well. For others, it's wherever that routine is, set it and use the same time every single day. Set the same time every single day.
Yeah. I'd say probably the whatever your routine is, morning, afternoon, evening, one of the best things you can do to increase your momentum is to deal with the technology addiction, is put the tech away more, right? I've literally gone back to a old school alarm clock that now sits on my night table. I'm still working on this, but most nights my phone's in another room. The technology, those phones, we're glued to them. And if there's anything that saps us, saps our energy, or distracts us from the things that are important and that eat away at our time, it's devices for most people. So much so I even created a tool that we're using, just starting to use with clients, called Tech Tamer. And it's an experience designed to help you with really cool strategies on how you can begin to wean yourself, not completely off, but reduce your reliance on technology to make more room. People say they don't have time for all kinds of things, right? I'm too busy. I can't pursue my goals. I'd love to, follow my heart, but I can't. I'm too busy. And I'm like, just look at how many hours you spend. Every phone has that app where you can see how long you've been on your phone for a week.
And no one wants to look.
No one wants to look, because it's pretty scary. But even if you could reclaim a fraction of the time there, like, think about how you could be applying that towards other things that are actually meaningful.
I don't know if you heard, but Australia has now released legislation. Social media is banned for kids under 16.
Yeah, it hasn't passed yet from what I heard,
but that's what they're pursuing, is to protect kids now because of the mindless scroll, because of that. Yeah. Like, it's an addiction, right?
Yeah, so I love the idea of going back to an old school alarm clock, because you're right. Most people use their phone, so they reach to stop the alarm, and they're immediately into doom scrolling. They're immediately into looking at emails. They're immediately into doing all this, and then suddenly the rituals and the routines that are going to help you grow are out the window.
Yeah. The Tech Tamer piece, we'll make that available, figure out a way to make that available to folks. We'll make it available to the folks in the Living Richly Nation for sure. It's part of a greater tool or experience around time mastery. And it's something, I think, if you're going to build momentum in any kind of way in your life, you have to deal with the time sinks that where it's okay to have downtime. We're not talking about not having downtime, but often that downtime is costing us tremendously when it's costing our uptime tremendously because how we're investing it, right? Now, we talked on the last show a little bit about this, but I'd like to go a little bit deeper into like regular growth check-ins, right? Again, I think this whole notion of it's so normal this time of year. By the time this episode airs, it'll be mid-January 2025 when it first airs. We're in December or November right now. We record these way in advance, right? But we're in that season now where people are more reflective and they're taking more stock as we get closer to the end of the year, taking more stock about, am I on track? Am I off track? What am I happy about? What do I want to change? And it's interesting that we make that something that's seasonal, when in reality, I think the most successful people I know practice regular self-check-in with themselves. So okay, let's explore that a little bit. What do you think about this whole notion of a growth check-in?
I just love the language growth check-in, right? Like there's so much life in that. There's so much positive in that. Language matters. We talk about it all the time, or how we think and how we view things. When you are looking at saying, it's time for my growth check-in, everything about that is positive to me and it's encouraging, right? Even if you haven't seen much growth, you're still recognizing that the end result is growth. So even how you check in, when you've maybe, taken a few steps backwards, if you're calling it growth check-in, you're going to go into it saying, okay, so what do I learn from this to keep growing? Because it's all about growth.
Right.
That's what I'm checking in. I'm not checking in on how I did on those resolutions, or I'm checking in on my growth. So I just the language alone is brilliant to me.
It's like, I just thinking about my kids and like their progress reports, aka ACA, the report card, right? And so it's to show progress. Yeah. But I'm with you, Rob. The word growth for me is great because I think applying that lens to it is not like, did I get a negative C or a D- on something, or did I get an F and fail it? Yeah. But if you can use that language around it, I think it makes a big difference. But I think tracking is important. I think it's what holds you accountable to actually, getting to that outcome, that final outcome.
Yep. Yeah. And Kate, you've mentioned it a couple times, and I just think it's so valuable, and it's just writing it down because I think weekly growth check-ins, if you're really intentional with them, can be tied a lot to the emotional component of what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and how you're responding. And even if you're just using the simplest tool on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5, even evaluating and writing it down, you'll start to identify patterns of behavior that you need. Because a lot of times we think we have it in our head. It's like somebody trying to lose weight and, no, I eat really well. Okay, but are we identifying the patterns of behavior and are we trying, right? Where then you're starting to be able to make those micro tests.
Yeah. To me, it's the analogy that I always think about is like, think of you're on a 12-hour flight and the pilot at takeoff is pointing in the right direction, but doesn't check on whether or not he's still on track, he or she's still on track. Because of course, when you're flying a plane, you're constantly adjusting because you're constantly deviating because of winds and whatever else. You're constantly getting off track by micro, degrees. And so imagine if that pilot isn't checking, am I still on track? It only checks in at the 11th hour. Right. Well, chances are they could be like way off target. Right. And that's kind of like what we do with this traditional seasonal model of, I don't kind of like where I ended up this year, so I'm going to set some resolutions to reset. And it's like I'm going to take off again. But then again, I'm not checking mid-flight all the way through to make sure I'm on track. And so growth check-ins to me are like you are checking in on your progress and where you've perhaps drifted. We all drift. Life happens. And sometimes those are meaningful deviations because adaptive goal setting would say, actually, I need to change my course because I've got a good reason to. Other times we just got distracted and pulled off course. Well, the more frequently we check in with ourselves, the less significant the deviation is, right? So rather than now having to make a massive course correction, I'm just making a micro correction and adjustment to my life. So you heard me talk about in the previous conversation, setting up a meeting with yourself, right? That's how I do it with some of my clients. Another way to do it is to incorporate it into a habit or a routine or a ritual that you already have. If you sit down on Sunday mornings typically and perhaps you make yourself a nice cup of coffee and you read the news or you do something like that, well, you're already setting time aside. You could easily make 30 minutes of that, 30 minutes of that, a weekly check-in to say, how am I doing? How'd this week go? Am I on track? Are there some things I need to pay closer attention to? Again, not in a spirit of judgment or criticism. No, I just want to stay on track, right? And I want to course correct if I'm not. Now, I know that when it comes to momentum and establishing new habits, that the world of challenges is, right, like a 30-day challenge. We even have a 15-day life vision challenge, although very few people can complete it in 15 days. So we're probably going to drop the 15-day part and just call it the life vision challenge. But challenges are very popular. People tend to respond to them really, really well. I think, Kate, you and I are not big challenge people when it comes to that, but you guys have really benefited from that, especially in the health and wellness space. I'd love to hear your perspective on it.
Well, it's interesting because I hate challenges. And
what?
I know.
I'm like,
I don't know.
The
The evidence seems to point in a different direction, Your Honor.
When they're done in isolation.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I set up and say, okay, I'm going to do this challenge and I'm going to, whatever that challenge is, and I have to do it alone, I inevitably fail. I give up. I lose interest. I get bored with it or whatever.
Yeah.
Part of we're introducing in the business world, we're introducing kind of a mastermind group. We want to bring together all of these business owners and organizational leaders together, really kind of help them challenge each other and push each other and do all of this. I thrive because one of my core values being community. I thrive when I get to do these challenges in community. So we do a fitness challenge. We do it multiple times a year, but we do it together. And it's it brings us closer together. We feel like we're accomplishing. We often do a number of the challenge pieces. We'll do them together and enjoy that. At Orange Theory, one of the things that we love to do every year, they do what they call the Transformation Challenge. And it's, I don't know, is it 2 months or 6 weeks? 8 weeks in length. But you've got about 150 other people all doing it, and everybody's progress is being tracked on these trackers that are all hanging up at the gym. And,
love that.
And you're cheering each other on. And when somebody hits whoever's, we have a big celebration party at the end where people get awards and all this kind of stuff. That kind of stuff, that's totally my jam. And those are the kind of challenges I love, is when you're able to do them with others. And what they help you do is they help you set a starting point, they help you set the end point, and they just give you the clear metrics that you need to follow in order to do that. Yeah. I know you love them. You love the notion of the checklist.
I gravitate towards checklists, even though I know it's in my head. I physically like to be able to check things off because I'm a very visual person.
Yeah.
And, I'll say often to clients, and I think, Eric, you mentioned it in the last episode. I can't remember what you were talking about, but you mentioned the visual component of it, and visual is memorable. So, I'll tell gym members or clients often, like, see the target, hit the target. So when you've got that bullseye, you've got that target. Yeah. Seeing that, just that visual reminder is very motivating for me, and it holds me accountable. Is probably a big thing. It's like personal accountability.
I can see how the structure, right, of a challenge where it's kind of predetermined for you, what you're doing it because it resonates with something you're trying to achieve. It in some ways makes the challenge is not easy, but they take the decision making part out of it in terms of, not the decision making, but the creating the structure is already there. There's a community behind it so you feel that sense of I'm part of something bigger, right? So again, challenges may work for some, may not work for others, but I love how you brought in the community piece. And also I think in the previous show, you talked about for folks who do it, but don't have other habits established, then usually the benefits of them are lost pretty quickly, right? And it'd be no different than someone who does the 15-day vision challenge and benefits from it, but they don't have a reflective practice built into their life. It is a reflective exercise, but the benefits will get lost pretty quickly because you're not going back to those and reflecting on them and making sure your life is on track, as we were talking about before, right? So I love that. How would let's talk about establishing a non-negotiable self-care practice, and how can that help ensure balance and making sure you're still moving forward even on those crazy busy days or weeks? One non-negotiable self-care practice.
Yeah, it's hard. I think like the self-care, and I'll speak for moms and women tend to put themselves last more often. Research shows that. And I think what happens is we all hear it, self-care becomes to the bottom of the list, right? So if you can start your day with some self-care, sometimes that's a great option where you can that's your minute. I mean, meditation for me is self-care. So that's self-care that I take. I do think it's hard to carve out self-care. I think it's so critically important because it recharges, right? So if you feel like you're being depleted of energy all day, if you don't recharge your own energy, you're no good to the people around you. And so you have to fuel yourself so that you can be a good partner, you can be a good parent, a good employee, a good boss, whatever that looks like. But you need to fuel yourself, and that comes with self-care. So I think it's critically important. I do think it's something that we often struggle to plug in.
Yeah. I liked it when I saw this strategy, again, as part of wanting to provide the nation lots of helpful sort of different lenses to look at all of this than what the traditional lenses have been. And this is one of the strategies that came up. I know for me, I guess I've always thought of my self-care practices, right? I've got many of them, everything from reflective to physical health, being in nature, exercise, all that kind of stuff. But for me, it tends to like when one of those goes, it all goes because, or a lot of it goes because I feel like I fucked up one part of it or I didn't quite do the formula right. So what's the point? It's like if someone is on a diet or trying to avoid certain foods and they fall off the wagon, and if they fall off the wagon, they're like, oh, fuck the rest of the day then. I've already messed it up. I might as well like really go for it, right? What I liked about this, or what I like about this strategy, is saying you may have many elements to your routine, your self-care, but look at it as a menu, and there's going to be days where you can't enjoy the whole menu. You just can't enjoy all the courses, right? Because of busyness, life just showed up. But if you pick one as sort of your non-negotiable, regardless of what happens, I'm going to take this 10 minutes for me. I'm going to take this 15 minutes for me. All of a sudden, self-care is not falling to the back of the bus, to the back seat. It's still central. Anyway, I found that like a bit of a big, like, whoosh, like a mind shift to go, oh, wow. I always thought, again, we talked about the all or nothing trap on resolutions. And I just came to realize when it comes to self-care, I've kind of been falling into the all or nothing trap.
It's funny how we do that, right? They use the example of the diet. Oh, I messed up today. I might as well just go all that. Like imagine if
let's order 3 pizzas.
Right. Imagine if we applied that to everything in life, right? You're cutting a piece, a piece of fruit or whatever, and you accidentally cut your finger. Oh, well, I might as well slice off my arm, right? Right? It's the most ridiculous, but it's ridiculous.
I am not doing kitchen prep with you ever.
Oh, I cut my finger. I might as well cut off Eric's arm.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I'm running the other way.
But as silly as that sounds, it's the exact same thinking that we do when it comes to when we mess up one area. Well, I might as well just give up on everything for the day. Why? They just start from where you are in that moment.
No, that's true though, because I've used the analogy before. When you get a flat tire, you don't say "fuck" and slash the other tire. You fix the flat tire. Yeah. Oh, it's just money. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I think all of that ties back to no one is going to do that for you, because balance is not something that you find. It's something that you create.
Yeah.
And you can ask for help, but you can't expect anybody to do it for you. You need to be very intentional about, again, carving out your boundaries, deciding what your non-negotiables are, and creating that balance instead of desperately trying to find it. We hear it all the time. I don't have time in my day. I don't have time to do this.
That's bullshit.
You need to make tweaks to be able to create that.
I want to flip I'm gonna take over hosting for a second here.
You're fired.
I want to answer a question. You can't fire me.
All right, you got job security.
But just to flip this around, because I struggled with this, the notion here of the non-negotiables in this. How do you tie in saying this is a non-negotiable and grace and compassion when don't do your non-negotiable, right? If it's a
Right.
non-negotiable, that means you're saying you will never not do it. It's a must. How do you tie in the compassion in that for somebody who says, my non-negotiable is meditation every morning, and then they don't meditate?
I think for me, the way that I defined it as I looked at it is what you're saying is this one really matters. Above all my other routines or self-care practices, this one is the one I tend to benefit from the most. And when it's not present in my life, I feel that one more than I feel the others, right? And so non-negotiable means it's essential. It's critical. It doesn't mean I have to do it every day. And then if I don't do it every day, I've fallen, off the wagon. It's just getting, I think, again, just like we encourage, in the Living Richly Nation, get clear on the things that fill your cup, get clear on the things that drain you. Well, when it comes to self-care, what are the things that really fill your cup? And in those, what are your top three? Again, for me, the liberating piece here is I don't have to do all three every day or even every week. As long as I'm doing one of those things, then it's the consistency. It's showing up for myself on a regular basis, demonstrating that if I don't fill my cup, I am going to feel that. I'm going to lose my momentum. I can only go on a tank that's near empty for so long. You can only drive your car on fumes for so long before it just stops going altogether, right? I don't know if that answers the question.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think that absolutely. And that notion of the consistency is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that's a good distinction for our listeners. Like the non-negotiable is just maybe the most important one that you want to focus on.
Yeah. Maybe
you can host
change that. Can I get my job back? I pass. My answer was good enough. I got my job back. Okay, I'm back hosting. Let's talk about the importance. I know we're not trying to put all this big emphasis on January. I think what we're trying to say is you can pick any time to start change. But there's something about starting the year fresh, perhaps, and one of the strategies presented was about decluttering, right? Decluttering your physical space, right? A little bit of the out of the box strategy that we might not consider, but decluttering your physical space and even your emotional space. What would you guys have to say about that?
Yeah, well, fresh example, because you just helped me declutter my basement. So physical.
Oh my God.
I talked about it before on the show. My basement's a thing.
Actually, a big breakthrough, or not breakthrough, because we were newly together, but sort of a significant moment in our relationship is when you let me into your basement.
It's a very vulnerable space for me, my basement. Anyway,
then there was a time she let me mow her lawn.
We're not going there. We said we'd never revisit that one.
Yes, we are. Oh, yes, we are. Because it's really funny.
So the basement. Anyways, it turned into whatever. You kids put their clothes away, you put them in the basement, and you're going to donate them. You mean well, but you don't. They start piling up, and it just creates. But every time I go in the basement, it's amazing the mental space that it takes up for me. So it clutters my brain with the stress of like, oh, I got to do this. Like, and then it's the negative self-talk is, well, how could you let it get like this? Like, why haven't you done this sooner? Like, oh, you're lazy. And then it spirals down into this path. So it is clutter in my brain. But when we got rid of we did like a whole big Jeep full load and went and dropped everything off, which felt really good. And we went down to get the Christmas decorations, and I walked down and I was like,
oh, look, there they are.
Like it was like this breath of, and we only did like one small spot, but I was amazed at how much the physical clutter took up mental clutter for me.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
the negative self-talk around that's so true, right? Every time you go into a space or into anything, right? And you're like, oh, right. And you start to hear that inner critic.
Yeah. And I'm the queen of like, my house is very clean.
Yeah.
But like, I just hide the clutter. Like I just hide it. Like don't open doors. Like just
right.
So there's a couple of drawers. Well, we all have the couple of junk drawers in the house, right? Where it's like, don't ever open that, because that's where everything goes that doesn't quite have a home. Or when we just don't feel like cleaning up.
Yeah, so if I don't see it, it doesn't take up so much room.
Right.
For us, it's the pantry. If you have a walk-in pantry, it's wonderful because it's nice. You can keep your food in there, but you can also push everything else.
It's like, oh shit, people are coming over. Fill the pantry.
I think clutter is really, when we come down to it, it's nothing more than postponed decisions.
Yeah,
it's things that we just don't want to deal with. And so. Yeah. Going into, and I think a basement for a lot of people is, don't look behind that wall.
I'm going to go take pictures and post them in the Facebook group after.
Surprise. But asking yourself, does it support the life I'm trying to create?
Yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
bedroom
Love that.
space is a big thing for people, right?
Yes.
And I mean, we all have kids, and I'm sure we've all experienced, walking into your kid's room and you're
Yeah.
like,
Oh my God, how do you live in this? Yeah.
How do you live in this, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
you feel, and to them they're like, no, whatever. But as adults, having a clean, organized bedroom, that's your sacred space, right? And if your bedroom is messy, so how are you going to meditate? How are you going to journal? How are you going to reflect in a place of chaos?
Yeah.
Totally.
Wendy's the queen of decluttering. If something sits in a place for too long, it's on Marketplace. I sat still for too
I saw
long.
you listed on Marketplace the other day. Yeah.
I was listed on
I
Marketplace.
thought, he must have been taking a nap and
up on the couch and suddenly I was
suddenly people are calling to say, is he really for sale?
How much can you discount?
I couldn't sell you.
Nobody buy. No.
Try Kijiji next time.
Right. Yeah. But
Craigslist.
There is something to this. I remember, and you know the story about a client of mine, and one of the things we were doing testimonials. This was years ago, and the client, their comment was, "You helped me take out the head trash."
Yeah.
And that was their biggest value in having a coach for their business, was somebody who could help them take all the clutter of all the things that they're thinking and to be able to take out some head trash and to clean out some of that. And that notion of head trash is so important for all of us. We all have a junk drawer. We all have a mental junk drawer.
Oh, big time.
And we push a whole bunch of stuff in there that we just hope doesn't ever spill out. Why not empty that out?
Yeah. Recently, we were with some coaching colleagues from around the world, and we were in California, Newport Beach area, beautiful, beautiful area. And we were masterminding for the afternoon, but out on the water. We were all in boats that sat no more than 6 or 7 people. And we were out for a couple of hours on the water, just helping each other with our businesses and brainstorming and everything else. And one fellow was there, and he's a good friend of mine now. And he started talking about his challenges. And you could tell he had some major mental clutter around this issue. And I really challenged him about the narrative and the story he was telling himself, that he really needed to rethink that. And I think that's what decluttering, whether it's physical or emotional, it's about creating clarity. You can't see forward, and it's occupying so much space that there's not a lot of room for other stuff. And at one point in the conversation, you could tell it was punching a nerve, because he was pushing back on us. You could tell this was very emotional for him, this story he was telling himself. And one of the other coaches from Australia looked at him and said, "You floss your teeth, don't you?" He goes, "Yeah." "I think you need to floss your mind, mate." And it was like mic drop moment, right? So good. But I think decluttering, the physical act of decluttering is a bit of mental clarity. And when we talk about decluttering, negative emotion, grudges, things that we're holding on to, just like it's piling up in the junk drawer, like you said, Rob, it's like we've got this space in our hearts and our minds where these unfinished projects or these unresolved issues go, and we'll always carry a measure of that. I don't think we are ever in a place where we're walking completely free from all those things. But as it builds up over time, it really has a way of weighing us down, slowing our momentum, sapping our energy, sapping our motivation. And so taking those moments to declutter, I think is absolutely critical, right? Absolutely critical. Let's talk about decluttering your digital life, shall we? Because we were just talking about it a little bit earlier, and reevaluating, because I think there's and I know Wendy, this is something that you're really passionate about. So I'd love you. I'd love you just to jump in. Jump in on this one.
This is my favorite time of year. I started doing this many years ago, and it's just so satisfying to just, because your goals and kind of your path can shift over time, which I think is super healthy. Like anybody that says that people don't change and whatever, like we do tend to go down different paths. And so I think at the end of the year, and this is where I usually do this over the Christmas holidays, is really just evaluating my Facebook friends, my phone contacts, like people that I'm out of touch with. And again, it's the clutter component, and it's the stuff on what I want to consume and what I want to see and what I want to fill my mind with. So, and Instagram is a big one, right? Like all of the stuff that we see. So unfollowing stuff. And it's not because I'm being an asshole and I want to get rid of all my contacts, but it's who's not serving me right now. Like, who do I not? I don't need to keep in touch with everyone. Right. And it's just such a wonderful ability to just reevaluate my space and just lighten up the load a little bit.
Yeah.
And be more intentional about what I'm consuming.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
It just hit
Love
me.
that.
It's January 15th. I'm just set. I'm going to go. I just want to see if she's still following me. I wonder if I made the cut.
Why do you think she was trying to sell you on Marketplace? She unfollowed you months ago.
Okay.
It's all coming together.
Yeah. Yeah. We often talk about our values as a compass. They're also a filter.
Right.
And we can filter through a lot of this stuff, a lot of the digital stuff that we are digesting. Filter it through our values. Does it meet the value check?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Exactly what I do.
Yeah, 100%. Does this is actually align with my values? Yeah. I think when it comes to sorry.
No. I was just going to say, I think we rarely do an audit of our socials. And I think the fact that you do that annually is so critical. Not just socials. What are the apps that you're on your phone?
Yeah.
What are
yes.
what are the notifications that keep filling up in your
Yep.
day? But we don't, right? And we often just keep downloading. It's very rare that you go in and you
Just
get
delete.
rid of stuff and you actually audit it. And I think
Good point.
that approach is so good because great. Just let's declutter, declutter the phone a little bit so that you can declutter your brain a little bit.
Well, we talk a lot about mindfulness and what that means. And I think a lot of times our minds we are being mindful in terms of we have a mind full of distracting, negative thoughts, things that get us to play the comparison game. And I think socials have play a big role in us feeling less than, because we're often comparing ourselves to others. And as mentioned before, often what we're comparing ourselves to is not the real them. We're comparing ourselves to their highlight reel, right? Which is often doesn't have any of the negativity in it. So like we talk about mindfulness, to me, it's like when we introduce the notion of mindful masculinity. You choose how you're going to show up, not just, right. We talk about mindful leadership in our coaching work, right? What kind of leader do you want to be? I think embracing a mindset of mindful consumption. What am I consuming? Hey, it's okay to sit there and have fun watching some silly stuff online, but let's just be mindful of how much stuff we're consuming. Is it helping? Is it hurting us? Is it helping us build momentum? Is it causing us to lose momentum? I want to talk about things that fill our cup for a moment, and then I want us to kind of go to strategies for when we experience setbacks, okay? Because I think that's a really important aspect, and just with the time that we have, I want to make sure that we get there. But how does investing in things like hobbies, pursuits, experiences that you enjoy, how does that help when it comes to building momentum? Because it's almost like these things are a break from the pursuit of things that are often seen that way, and yet they can really impact our energy. So how does that show up for you guys?
Well, I think it brings joy. So doing happy people are people that pursue things that they love to do. That's research supports it. Those people are happy because they're investing their time in things that they like to do.
Yeah.
So I think if you're filling your cup, however you're filling your cup, if it's a hobby, whatever that is, if that fills you up, then your cup is full to then maybe take on something new in January, maybe to try something new, maybe to level up, right? So if you're filling your cup, right? We just talked about how do you take time for yourself and self-care? That's part of it, right? That's part of filling your cup, but also part of your filling your cup is like, how do I bring joy into my life? Because when you're joyful, then you're way more likely to be excited or looking forward to, bringing it up a level or trying something new.
Yeah.
There's an book I read probably, I want to say 7, 8, maybe even 9 years ago called
Maybe 10,
maybe even 10,
maybe 11,
more 11,
maybe 12,
could be 15.
could be 7.
Yeah, could be. Called the Happiness Advantage.
Oh yeah, great book.
Sean Acor.
Great book. Oh, that was 8.5 years ago.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And his whole premise of the book was, again, he did a bunch of research with Harvard students who should be all happy because they've got all this success. And the whole notion of happiness advantage is happiness is not a result of success. Success is a result of happiness. And that if you live a life where you are pursuing the things that bring you joy, that bring you satisfaction, you'll discover that that's where success comes out of.
Love that.
Versus the other way around. Great book, and I highly recommend it. We'll put it in the show notes. But yeah, that idea of start with happiness and see where it takes you versus the other way around.
That's what is at the very essence of, in the 15-day challenge, we talk about your happiness inventory. What are the things that fill your cup, and your energy drain list? What are the things that literally empty you, right? Happy people are more full. And when you think of how life shows up, one thing we can expect is that shit will show up on our doorstep. Hardship will be part of our experience. Do you want to face that stuff with your tank near empty, or would you rather face it and navigate it when your tank is full? So for me, when you are taking that time to pursue things that fill your cup, you're going to have way more energy, way more purpose, way more passion, way more resilience than if you're barely making it and then life throws you a curveball. Then you're going to probably experience a major setback.
You ask so many people, like, what are your hobbies? And they're like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know. And I think about, some of the things that, and actually as we're talking, not that I'm distracted, I'm fully present in what we're talking about.
Always.
But I'm thinking, like, we love doing puzzles, and we have a puzzle that's been unfinished for a while, but things like that where, we're just focusing on just dreaming and using our mind and just not focused on, we went out for dinner last weekend and we just left our phones at home because,
Oh, there's a great strategy. Yeah.
Like we don't need our GPS. We know where we're going, and we're gone for a couple of hours, but it was just a nice way to just be fully present and fully disconnect. So I think going back to what,
and the anxiety of that was interesting. Go back to talking about the digital detox, right? Because the anxiety, like we literally left them at home. So we're driving and it's like, well, what happens if there's an issue with the car?
Yeah,
right. What happens if somebody's trying to get a hold of us?
The world is going to end.
Right. And what we actually discovered was nothing else happened.
Right.
We just had a very a beautiful night of just interacting with each other, and like no Apple Watches, no notifications coming in from anywhere. It was wonderful.
I love that sort of like dreaming part. Eric and I went to a little different, but we went to the Chio Dream Home just to go look at it. This is a beautiful $3 million gorgeous home.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things where you walk in and it's just like, you're like, this is stunning.
Yeah.
Like it's like just this beautiful home. And it's the same thing. It's just like, it's visualizing that dream piece of what, right? And I think the dreaming piece is really
well, the puzzle that Wendy's talking about that we've been working on for couple of years now, right? We pull it out every once in a while. We haven't pulled it out in a while. We need to do that. Is of a place we're planning to go.
Yeah, I love it.
Right? So it adds in as we're adding and putting the pieces together. This is going to be a place where one day we're actually going to take a picture that is identical to the puzzle.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that.
I love it. Dreaming alone doesn't create momentum. It creates fuel for momentum.
I agree.
Yeah.
Because it's dreaming plus action. But I think a lot of us are trying to hustle and muscle our way there, and we haven't gotten clear on the dream. We lack the fuel, even though we're putting in the effort. I'd like us to, before we do a lightning round of like, what's the one thing you want to leave our listeners with on this subject, I do want to cover one more very important question because I think it's critical. And it's about quick strategies or just strategies period that someone can use, our listeners could use to realign their lives when they feel they've gotten off course. Because again, I think getting off course, being on course and off course, think of the pilot again. He's constantly off course and constantly adjusting. But what are some strategies people could use to get back on course?
Yeah, well, one I'll throw out right away is because it's I had a conversation with somebody about this recently. Wendy will do this at the gym so the way the Orange Theory model works very quickly. There's 3 stations, and you have people are habit, right? I start on the tread. I always start on the tread.
I like the ice cream station. That's my favorite one.
That's the finishing station.
Is that where he's
the finisher?
I tend to start and finish there.
And one of the things that Wendy will often encourage members to do is, hey, why don't today you start on the rower? Oh, I don't start on the rower. I start on the tread.
Right.
And her comment will be, you'll be amazed at how different the results are that you'll get from this class by just switching it up. And so I would say for people that are kind of where they get off track or it becomes mundane or something, just add a little element, just tweak it a little bit and try it, come at it from a different angle is a great strategy for all of a sudden reigniting the passion for it.
Love that. Love that. Change it up, right? Change it up.
Yeah.
I would say find who your person is. And sometimes that's your spouse, and sometimes it's not. And sometimes it's, finding that person that will call you out when you're playing small, or when you're being too hard on yourself, also too soft on yourself. Somebody who has compassion, but who is also there to show you and help support you in the fact that you can level up.
Yeah, I love that. I like to ask the question when I get off track, what's the next right step for me to take? What's the next thing I need to do to get back on track? And the more frequently you ask yourself that question, then the smaller the steps need to be, because you're not, right? If you've drifted significantly from your goals or from your intentions, then again, that can feel overwhelming. Getting back on track can feel like this overwhelming project, like endeavor. I don't know where to start. So asking the question, what's the next right thing I need to do? You don't need the whole plan. Just take the next step, get back into motion, and the way will be made clear, right?
So good. I'm going to come back to like revisit what you wrote down. And when you set it out and you write it down, add your why. What is the why behind you doing it? Because if the why is really in sync with your values, then there's a deep why behind it. So if you can do the why when you're setting them out, and then when you revisit it and come back and you're slightly off course, it just helps give you that sort of mind-heart connect again around why you're doing it in the first place.
I love it.
Yeah, that's so great. That's so great. Guys, this has been such a great conversation. Let's do one final lightning round. What is the final thought or thoughts? We're going to try to keep this concise, but each of us, what would you want our listeners, what do you want to leave our listeners with on this topic?
Well, we all get the same 365 days. We all get the same day for the most part. And I would say stop giving people the pen to write your story when you can choose to write every day how you want it.
Yeah. Love that. Love that.
Yeah. I would say, we have an old cliche saying that we would say with businesses, until it passes through the lips or the fingertips, it isn't real. Right. Yeah. And this idea of, communicate what your intentions are with someone, or with lots of people. Write them down, share them, speak them out every day. Yeah. Keep them front and center that way is a critical step.
Keep them on your radar. Yeah. Love it.
I think I would just reinforce, approach it with flexibility. Like this year, maybe try it a bit different. If you're hopping in January, we talked about a whole bunch of different approaches you could take this year, whether it's going, doing the January and trying that out. Just give your permission to be flexible this year and see where you land.
Yeah. I love that. I would say I would remind our listeners that resolutions are nothing but wishes without a blueprint. That every day can be New Year's Day, that every day brings with it the hope of a fresh start and a new beginning. No matter what yesterday was like, today you have the opportunity to move in the direction you want to go. So just take it one day at a time, little by little, slowly by slowly. Folks, we're so glad you've listened in today. I hope you have found this conversation meaningful. I know I've had a ton of ahas over the last couple of shows about how I treat this time of year, and we hope that it's been as meaningful for you. We remind you to like, share, and subscribe to the show. Let's get the word about the Living Richly message out there, and we appreciate your support on that front. Also, make sure to visit livingrichly.me, our website, where you can find great information about our Facebook group, the Living Richly Nation, the 15-day Life Vision Challenge, and all of Kate's newly released gratitude get-to material, which is pretty exciting, including her get-to cards. You're going to find all that information there. And of course, if you know someone who could really benefit from the content of these specific shows, share the link out, okay? And help them benefit from this conversation as well. We look forward to seeing you next time. And until then, keep on living your best life.